Welcome everybody, this is Isaac from TheNintendoBosses, bringing you our channel's first ever review. This is going to be a review of The Legend of Zelda, A Link Between Worlds, as you can probably already tell. In my reviews, I will give you a spoiler-free summary, and discuss 5 topics of the game. The first being graphics, next, soundtrack, third, gameplay, fourth, difficulty, and finally, whether or not I had fun playing it overall. Each one I will rate on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst and 5 being the best. These scores will then be averaged out at the end to get a final score out of 10. Also, I have not played A Link to the Past, so this is coming from someone who is new to this map and layout. Now finally, we can get to the critiques. Keep in mind, this is a summary, so I will give more explanation about how I actually felt about the storyline later. The game starts out with Link having a bad dream of being in grave danger, foreshadowing at its finest. He's then hastily awakened by a character named Gully because he is late for work. So you go to the blacksmith's, which is where Link works, and see a cutscene between the blacksmith and the captain of, I guess, Hyrule's army. The captain somehow forgets his sword, so you already have a task on your hands, to go deliver it to him. You're sent to the castle where the captain is presumed to be, but he is not there. The game foreshadows again by showing soldiers trying to scrub off paintings. You finally get to where the captain actually is, the sanctuary. However, this is where something is wrong because you're locked out, and have to sneak in. Once you end up inside, you're then introduced to the antagonist, Yuga, who wants to turn beautiful people into paintings, and for a reason that I won't say. Yuga is too powerful for Link, and so Link is quickly defeated. From there, Link awakes back in his house where he's surprised to find a bunny-like character named Ravio. Link allows Ravio to stay in his house, and Ravio returns the favor with an ancient relic, which at the moment has no use, but is important later on. Link then makes his way to Hyrule Castle to explain to Princess Zelda what has happened. And just so I don't spoil anything, I am going to end the summary on that note. Just so everyone knows, I believe there is more to a game than just graphics, so I won't be so critical about them. The only time I would be is when there's a lot of lag, glitches, or they're just flat out bad. This is, however, a topic I believe should be discussed since some people do care a lot about them. First off, you should know that A Link Between Worlds uses an overhead view rather than the perspective that all Zelda games since Ocarina of Time have been using. This is in no way a bad thing. In fact, it gives a feel of what traditional Zelda games would be like to those who haven't played many of the older games, such as myself. However, I could sometimes find it annoying that when moving to a different area in the overworld, you would have to wait for the screen to catch up. This could be especially annoying when fighting enemies. I get the idea that it was trying to be like A Link to the Past, but it took away the fluidity of the game somewhat. I didn't mind this too much, I just thought you should know. Next, this game has pretty similar graphics to many other 3DS games, such as Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon or Pokemon X and Y, meaning that it's full of color. These can be considered childish to some, but I like them. It's kind of what the 3DS is known for and makes the games more charming. The game really takes advantage of the 3D feature, and this is noticeable when Link is jumping off of a ledge or throwing a bomb, and is especially noticeable with all the vertical dungeons in the game. It looks incredible. Also, the scene when going from Hyrule to Lorule really stood out in a good way, and while I don't typically play games with the 3D feature on, I would actually use it for once during this game. So that's it for graphics. There was no lagging or glitching. In fact, the game had the smoothest looking graphics out of all the 3DS games I have. I give the graphics a 5 out of 5. Let me just go out and say right away that the soundtrack in this game was outstanding. For a 3DS game, it was especially good. It was the best soundtrack I've heard in a long time. I don't know which themes were remakes from A Link to the Past and which were original to A Link Between Worlds, but it was all fantastic. My personal favorites were the Mother Maya Maya and Lorule Castle themes. While these were my favorites, everything was great. It just made the adventure that much better to have an amazing soundtrack to accompany it. The game does a great job of living up to the standards that all previous Zelda games have set for soundtrack. I have no complaints. Overall, the music was just flat out spectacular. Definitely 5 out of 5. This is a topic I feel should be graded more critically, as it's a major factor in games. A large part of the gameplay is the controls. The controls in this game were amazing. Everything ran smoothly, and didn't feel awkward like in some 3DS games where you have to press multiple buttons at once. A brief rundown is that B is for sword, X and Y are for items, circle pad is to move, and A is for the new merge feature. Speaking of the merge feature, let's go a little bit more in depth about it. This was shown and advertised in all the trailers of A Link Between Worlds. You may be thinking it's just an item for maybe one of the dungeons or something, but no, you will be using this the entire game. I was a big fan of this feature. I thought it would get repetitive or annoying to use, but it just becomes second nature after a while. You will know exactly when to use it and when not to. It was also used to travel from Hyrule to its twin Dark World, Lorule. And yeah, that's right, Lorule. Anyway, you will find out more about Lorule and why it's significant as you play the game, but I won't spoil it for you. The merge feature was very creative. It allowed for original puzzles and collecting things. It was applied fantastically to the game. Aside from the merge feature, I thought the dungeons and side quests were incredible. The dungeons were remarkably put together and made great use of the items. There were many things to do, like collection and minigames, even though I still haven't found a way to beat that stupid baseball minigame. The collection consists of heart pieces, Mai-Mais, and bees. As in all Zelda games, it's good to collect the heart pieces, but you will also want to collect the Mai-Mais. Each time you collect 10, Mother Mai-Mai will upgrade one of your purchased items. I found this to be very helpful, especially for the fire and ice rod. Also, the Mai-Mais aren't too hard to find. Most just involve either merging into a wall to free them, or diving underwater to save them. Now let's discuss the items in this game. Not the items themselves, but how you get them. Unlike most Zelda games where you find items in dungeons, you will now have the opportunity to rent and eventually buy items from Ravio. When renting, you'll have to give the items back each time you get a game over. If you buy them, then they're yours forever. Renting is a cheap way to go, being only 50 to 100 rupees each time. However, buying will cost 800 to 1200 rupees. I was a bit skeptical about this feature when I first found out about it, but it's really not that bad. What's good about this is that all items are offered early in the game, and at the same time. This allows for you to challenge the dungeons in any order you please. This also means you can potentially have the fire and ice rod going into the first dungeon if you want. In addition, the dungeons each have a special treasure in them to make up for not finding items. While I was okay with this feature, I do hope that Nintendo brings back the getting items in dungeons for the next Zelda game. By the way, you won't need to worry about having enough rupees in this game. There are so many chests, enemies, and mini-games that you'll be cashing out. This is very creative by Nintendo because now rupees are much more significant than in previous Zelda games. I mean, there are 4 digits on the rupee counter for a reason, and this is without any wallet upgrades. Now for my actual opinion on the storyline, not just a summary. What I loved about the game's storyline is that it's so fast-paced. You always have the obligation to continue with your quests without any downtime. By downtime, I mean like doing the statue part in Twilight Princess, or collecting pieces of the Triforce in Wind Waker. Basically events that are anticlimactic. Also, the game's story gets going right from the start. You are almost instantly introduced to the conflict and antagonist, which was a great way to engage the player. While some Zelda games start out slow, this one definitely doesn't, and I think that's why I didn't put this game down as I do to most. Overall, the story was good. It was original, there was a new villain, and it was very creative on how it used merging and, well, Hyrule and Lorule. Not to mention the villain was intimidating. I mean, let's be honest, what is it? No, but to get back on track, Yuga was very frightening, just by he or she is presented. While there were some things that were pretty predictable, it was made up for with a major plot twist at the end. That's all I'll be discussing for gameplay. I give it a 5 out of 5. I found A Link Between Worlds to be, for the most part, at a fair difficulty. I definitely wouldn't say that it was as hard as some of the other Zelda games in the series, but it had its tricky moments. What I like is that there was no hand-holding. After you get your sword, you're left on your own to explore and figure out where to go next. Some of the bosses were difficult, but others were significantly easy. However, most of the easier bosses would reappear later in minigames or as mini-bosses. I had a total of 7 game overs, which I wouldn't say is too bad, but I could have done better. Most of these came from either the Ice Temple or just being caught off guard by certain enemies. As a side note, the Ice Temple wasn't too difficult, I just suck when it comes to sliding around. I've spoken with a few people who have played A Link to the Past, and they found A Link Between Worlds to be easy due to the fact that it was the same map, and most of the methods to advance in the game were the same. One thing you should know though is that these people still loved the game. They said there are enough differences between the two for it to be its own game, especially when it comes to dungeons and collection. Aside from what I've already said, you will have some puzzles that you will most likely be stuck on. The treasure hunter side quests are always a challenge, as is this race-like thing with the Pegasus boots. The dungeons will require some deep thought and memory, as well as basic skills. I kind of had a hard time explaining this, but overall the difficulty lies between fair and easy. There's also a hero mode available upon completing the game where you take 4 times the damage, so hopefully this can serve as compensation for those who found the game too easy. I give the difficulty a 4 out of 5. Overall, I had a lot of fun playing this game. Directly upon completing it, I developed some sort of nostalgia and a desire to play it again. It instantly became my favorite 3DS game, topping even Pokemon Y. But I'm serious about the nostalgia part. Somehow it just established a good memory inside, even though I haven't played A Link to the Past. It just has some sort of charm that most games lack. There was a lot to do, I enjoyed the storyline, I loved the dungeons and soundtrack, it didn't get boring, and it was just a great game as a whole. More importantly, the game focused on being fun. I haven't had this much enjoyment from a game in a while. I would highly recommend this to anyone who is deciding whether or not to get it, or just to someone who wanted to know about it. Definitely go and play it. I would say this would be a great place to start for someone who hasn't even played a Zelda game yet. This is a must-own on the 3DS. 5 out of 5 for fun. So in total, this averages out to a 9.6 out of 10, which is amazing. One last thing I have to say though is, why does Link have Majora's Mask in his house? Anyway, this game was amazing. Get it if you haven't already. Isaac from the Nintendo Bosses, signing out. See ya.